Did Disney just con SAG-AFTRA and actually get everything it wanted in regards to AI? Virtually. No pun intended. Welcome to SciTrek, your sci-fi TV and movie channel. So today, SAG-AFTRA has released a load more detail about the deal that it has with the studios. And really, the bit about AI goes on and on and on. There are so many variables. It's fair to say it's incredibly complicated. Now, I actually told you a few weeks ago, a lot of the other studios, Disney aside, were not that bothered about AI. There was a deal, basically in principle, a while ago that set out a very simple legal framework that covered the use of artificial intelligence and basically replicating somebody's image, using that technology to replicate a voice, replicate a recognizable digital copy of somebody, and using it in movies and cartoons and whatever. That deal basically said that, look, if we're going to use something that's recognizable as you have to consent and we will pay you. As simple as that. It was not massively complicated. It was not massively convoluted. So why have they been arguing about it for months? Well, Disney was holding on to every scrap of use of AI that it could. Why? Because it's been spending massive amounts of money on using digital technology to replicate people for ages. We've seen that in Star Wars, for example, where they made a young Luke in the second series of Mandalorian, where we first saw the young Luke Skywalker. It was very plasticine and, to be honest, reminded me of the Polar Express. His mouth was all weird and the eyes weren't right. But by the next time we saw young Luke Skywalker, the technology had already progressed just in that year, and it was much, much better. Occasionally, you could kind of tell it wasn't quite right, but on the whole, it wasn't bad. And remembering that that was a TV budget, not a big cinematic movie. You go on to Indiana Jones, where they created a digital version of Harrison Ford as a younger man, and it worked pretty well. So the technology is progressing quickly and really is only limited by how much money you're willing to spend on it. And Disney have been really spending money. So what are the areas that they really wanted to pin down and get a little bit more from SAG-AFTRA than they were willing to offer? Well, we have this new deal, and it basically splits up the use of digital technology into three specific areas: employment-based use of this technology, independently created digital replicas, and background workers. So we'll cover the background stuff first. Actually, I think SAG-AFTRA did get a really good deal on this because basically they've done the same thing with all three of these sections, that any time that this technology is used, it has to be consensual. So basically the studio has to tell you before you sign the contract exactly why they're going to use this digital replica of you. And basically you have to give them permission. The wording is very fluffy in a few places. It basically says that the studio has to give you a reasonable description of what that is going to be used for. But then there is one very interesting line in each one of these three sections. And it does say once permission is granted, even after you die, that permission continues unless specifically says not to. So basically what that means is they can continue to use that image for as long as they like, unless something in the contract specifically says they can't. So even when you die, they get to use that image in the way that you agreed. Now, that doesn't sound too bad, does it? Because if you agree to do something, then fine. But how about if you're a struggling actor? How about if you don't really understand the contract that you're signing? What if you're basically just willing to sign anything because you're just desperate for a job? Then all of a sudden, even after you're dead, that contract stays legal under this agreement. Now, the main thing with the background actors is that it's basically said that you can use a background actor for this, and this, as long as it's agreed. You do not have to pay them extra if you use this for tiling. And that's basically when they take, say, 100 actors and they superimpose a boom, 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 boom over top of each other over and over again, and make it look like 100,000 people. And they do this a lot in battle scenes. They've been doing it for years. But what it does say, interestingly, is that if an actor's background image, if the contract basically is specifically for a background use, and then it is digitally manipulated to make it either look like or to actually say words, it cannot be used as a background image anymore. It actually then clicks into one of the other two categories as basically a working actor rather than just somebody in the background. So what are the other two? Employment-based, the use of digital technology within a specific contract. So now this is, you're an actor, you're starring in a movie, they take a digital scan of you, and they can then basically do stuff with it. For example, make you look younger, make you look older, make you be able to do triple backflips, whatever. Now that is basically just using CGI, computer-generated imagery, like we've been doing for a few years now. For example, if you're Tom Holland and you're in the next Spider-Man movie, there are certain things that Spider-Man can do that you can't, and they need to use CGI. Now, when they're going to be doing this with the use of AI in particular, which is like next generation CGI, they have to explain exactly what that technology is going to be used for and what the digital copy of you will then be used for. That needs to be spelled out reasonably. So again, the studio only basically has to tell you what is reasonable, i.e. they do not have to go into the minutiae of every single detail of what they're going to do with it. They just need to give you the broad strokes. That digital image can then not be used for anything else. An interesting thing, though, is that if the digital image is then used for something that appears in the movie, the studio has to figure out how many days reasonably it would have took you, the actor, to film those parts if you had been able to. So, using the Spider-Man analogy, Spider-Man is swinging through the city, saving people left, right, and center. They decide to do that using AI. So Tom Holland is never there. The producers then have to go, but we had have used him on ropes, swinging through the thing, and if we'd have filmed that shot, how long is it reasonable to say those shots would have taken to film? 10 days? You get 10 days pay. That is how that new deal is going to work. Now, it's going to rely a great deal on the producers and the studios acting in good faith. And it actually says in the contract that they have to act in good faith. That is just a soft way of saying, we got to trust you. Now, I actually think a lot of studios with big stars will not try to faff around with that because they do not want to get somebody like Tom Holland kicking off afterwards going, you ripped me off by this many days and blah, blah, blah. Or you go and watch the movie and you suddenly, as an actor, realize, I'm only in like 10 minutes this film. The rest of it isn't me. And kicking off. But how many of the smaller actors will they do that to? And how many will they just go, 3 days, that'll do. At the end of the day, if you underestimate enough, once you've done that enough times, you start to make a really big saving as a studio. I actually had this once when I was in a job. I was basically being paid by the hour. And then years later, I bumped into my old manager and he's chatting away and he's having a laugh and he's saying that what I used to do was if anybody ever used to work like an hour and 5 minutes, I just used to round it down. And oh God, the bosses loved me because I was saving like 10% on the wages income basically. And I'm sat there going, you've forgotten I used to work for you. How many times did you round down my hours? How much did you cost me over the 2 or 3 years I worked for you? That is going to be at least a temptation for studios to round things down a little bit to save money. Again, permission for any of these projects and any of these contracts continues after death. So if you sign something to say that you can use my digital image in the sequel or the sequel or blah, 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 and you kind of have to opt out of that. So you have to say something explicitly for when the permission ends or it goes on forever. Now, to be honest, that's a relatively realistic and reasonable legal thing to do because particularly under this employment based, this contract would only actually be related to one production, i.e. one movie. So that doesn't really mean anything because once filming ends, permission technically ends too. The reason why I mention it, though, is because of the legalese of that is added for a specific reason, to create loopholes. And this is what Disney were trying to do. But there's one area in specific they've created a massive loophole, something that they fought really hard for, and something SAG-AFTRA did not want to give them: reshoots. There is a massive section in this, an exemption for post-production. Now, this is actually more to do with the next section, an independently created digital replica. And that basically means digitally they create an electronic version of you or your voice. They don't necessarily have to scan you, you don't necessarily have to be there for them to take the measurements or to create that replica. It is a digital creation of you. Now, again, you're an actor, you're in a big movie. They get to the end of the film and they realize, oh, there's a continuity error. You're wearing the wrong thing in your shirt or something. In the olden days, they would have to get you back, pay you for a couple of days' work, and do the reshoot to fix the problem. Now, this deal specifically says they don't have to do that. Now, to a degree, I would understand that. If it's a small error, a small problem, they would just fix it using CGI. But this goes on to say significantly more. So post-production, sound, wardrobe, pitch, continuity, adjusting dialogue or actual storyline, or any other related effect. So basically, that very loosely says any type of reshoot that they want to do, if they can do it without getting the actors back, they will. Now, why is that happening? Because studios, particularly Disney, have been spending a lot of money on the way they produce movies. And by this, I mean they've been planning for quite a while to eliminate the need for reshoots, because reshoots are massively expensive. So what happens normally? You do a film, say the new Avengers movie, and then you show it to a bunch of people and they don't like it. Or executives go, oh God, I don't like this, I don't like that. Or maybe there's a big scandal with one of the actors and you want to remove them or rewrite the story so that it doesn't basically create a load of problems. You have to then bring those actors back at normally massive expense, even though it would be contracted in, so they kind of don't have a choice. But worse, you might have to build sets, hire backlots, go back out to anywhere that you filmed previously, i.e., say if you filmed on a street somewhere, you then have to go get permits to do it again, over and over again. There are a million little problems with this and a million little expenses. It does sometimes add 10, 20, 30 million dollars onto the cost of a movie or more. But what Disney have been trying to do is planning ahead. During production, they have not doing a reshoot in mind, so that they can digitally change everything. So they will use more cameras than necessary and things like this in order to be able to then go to the 3D imaging at the end. And basically the CGI guy goes, right, I can just change it. The idea being that they will never need to do reshoots again, even if they change significant parts of the dialogue. Now, that is mad. And it basically means an entire tone of a movie could be changed. How important is certain lines? How important is certain actions within a movie? You could be an actor, you could agree to a script and do a movie and think you're the good guy. And by the end of it, through this digital manipulation, they could completely change your character. And there is nothing you could do about it. Again, I don't think this is going to affect the big A-list actors all that much, but the 95% of the other actors, I'd be a little concerned. And this is only really going to be relevant to motion pictures for now. But to be honest, TV series are getting such high quality now and having such big budgets that really the big budget TV shows are film level quality. So it's going to be affecting them too. Disney really fought for this one provision, and it really does give them almost free reign to do in post production whatever they want. And if I'm honest, from a production point of view, I can 100% see why the studios would want to do this. And apparently, Warner Brothers are on board with this as well. It's the only reason that Disney actually got it through, because they got some allies within the studios to support them. At the end of the day, it makes their life much, much easier. And if you have just a continuity error, it should be easily brushed up and fixed using CGI. Why not? Why would you go through the expense of the actors dragging them back and the cost? The actors probably wouldn't want to do it anyway. You're going to drag me back to LA for one day because I was wearing the wrong colour tie. Come on! But when you're changing dialogue, when you're changing the entire theme of a scene, I think that's a little different. Generally speaking, when you're digitally altering a performance, you need to get consent, except if it's in post-production, which most scenes, if they alter, will be. Even though the contract repeatedly says you need to get consent, it then says it has this exemption. And my point is, it creates a loophole. It creates very legal definitions that allow them to make certain alterations and never have to get consent for it. Disney have been very clever with this. And I tell you what, reading the document, I had to get somebody with a legal background to explain several elements of it to me. Because as my dad would say, it reads like DVD instructions. It reads like the instructions you get when you're installing a new printer. Way too many words, and all you want is a straightforward, what can I do and when? This document does not do that. It is, I am told, purposefully convoluted, purposefully complicated, and it really is going to require an awful lot of effort from studios and agents, etc., to really understand what they owe to the actors and when. I asked my source, have the Actors Guild, I asked my source, has SAG-AFTRA been conned? He said, well, yes and no. Obviously, this contract was going to be complicated anyway, because every contract ever is. But he says he can see several ways the studios can get around paying people when SAG-AFTRA think they're going to get paid. Because at the end of the day, if a studio behaves in good faith and follows this agreement in its spirit of the rules, then they shouldn't have a problem. But if a studio, and I'm looking at Disney, decides to follow many of these rules to the absolute letter and to be very specific about the way they use certain elements of this contract, then a lot of actors could get out of being paid a lot of money. And to be honest, the way the subscription deal for subscribers to contribute towards a fund for SAG-AFTRA is written in a very similar way. And I've also been told SAG-AFTRA might not get anything like the money they think they're going to get. This to me sounds an awful lot like in 3 years' time we're going to be having the same arguments. I just really hope the studios at least go into the spirit of the deal. And then hopefully we won't have more strikes. But let's see. At the end of the day, this whole thing with AI is a hot mess. It's very confusing. What is AI? What is CGI? What is it? It's complicated. The studios tried to have a simplified deal a few years ago, knowing that the courts might change all this anyway. If an actor decides to sue a studio and wins, it would create precedent and could throw this contract out of the window in a second. So they wanted something simple. I'm talking about the smaller studios now. But Disney want to use their massive investment in AI for as long as possible. It's not necessarily a good thing for most of the actors out there. But get into the comments and tell me what you think. Do these rules make sense to you? Have you actually read them? There's a link in the description to the Deadline story which tells you the whole thing. And honestly, go through each section of the AI rules in particular. If you can understand most of it, you're a better man than me. And do you actually agree with me that the chances are in 3 years' time we're going to be back having this same argument? I hope not, but it feels like it. Get into the comments and tell me exactly what you think. If you are new to the channel, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, do all the buttony things. It really helps us out, and you'll never miss any of our new videos. Also, go to patreon.com/SciTrek, where most of our new videos premiere first, and you get to see them without the adverts. For a small contribution each month, that really supports the channel. Also, go to scitrek.co.uk, which is our dedicated website where we do articles based on most of our stories, and we try to add a little bit more information for you to digest. As always, please stay safe, and I'll see you next time.